If you've ever been promoted to lead other leaders and felt like nobody handed you the manual, this one's for you. You'll learn why the jump to leader of leaders is way harder than it looks, while promoting your best performer can actually backfire, and the exact feedback skill most companies never teach their leaders. Joining me on this episode is Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Coach Mackie McAdam, who's helped leaders navigate this exact challenge. If you know someone stepping into that next level of leadership, send them this episode. They'll thank you for it. Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to No Limit Leadership. I am your host, Sean Patton, and today I am very pleased to have Mackie McAdam. He's an executive coach at Novus Global and chief marketing officer at a high-growth organization with over 15 years of experience leading teams across both the business and nonprofit worlds. He started his career in faith-based leadership as a pastor, where he developed a deep understanding of people, purpose, and transformation. Today, he brings that same heart-centered approach into the corporate space, helping leaders align culture, strategy, and systems to build high-performing teams that actually thrive. Mackie, welcome to the show, bro.
What's up, Sean? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, this is really fun for me. We both did our meta performance coach training together, and we're peer coaches. And so we got to coach each other and challenge each other and really getting to know you. I feel really blessed that I got put and paired with you over half a year. We've been helping each other grow and coach each other. And so it's been really cool to just get to know you. And so I was like, man, got to get you on the podcast. You have such a cool blend of experiences.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. I'm excited about it, man. I feel like I really am not, I've told you this before offline, and I really do believe I hit the jackpot with peer coaches, especially like knowing your background, but also seeing the results you create within your coaching, within the things that you're doing in your leadership. So I feel like I hit the jackpot of having you as a peer coach, man. So,
well, thanks, brother. I appreciate that, dude. All right. So let's go back. Let's go back in time a bit. I don't always do this every guest, but you have, again, sort of a very background. What drew you into the faith space, and was it right into the faith space, or was it the leadership inside of space? Inside of that faith space, what did that look like for you? What was the motivation?
Yeah, man. So, a couple of things. It really goes way back to when I was in high school, but I grew up in the faith space, in a Christian church down in Jacksonville, Florida. Had really great leaders that poured into me, and, having great leaders, makes you seek out more great leadership. And even for me, what I started feeling the tug for was to do that. I remember plain as day telling my youth pastors, like, man, the stuff you get to do, I would love to do that every day of my life. And I remember that conversation vividly happening, and that's what drew me in. And from there, he really took me under his wing and had several experiences in the faith space, whether it was internships and really coming right out of high school into an internship space, into Bible college, getting everything I needed there to have the education, to be equipped to do what I was doing. And yeah, it's, there was a calling for leadership, and I use the word calling loosely, even though the word calling gets loosely used in the faith spaces a lot. But I do feel that for me, for leadership, even in the private sector, I'd say it's a calling to me that I love leading, love developing people. My personality is not only a point A to point B personality, where I love finding the direct route there, maybe too much. I over index on getting to point B at times, but that's kind of what I've taken in my leadership too, where I want to help people get to the point B of where they want for their life, for their leadership. As I've come up in leadership, even in the faith space in the private sector, like I've had the privilege and the pleasure of leading leaders. That's a whole new world. You start adding layers of leadership that you're in, and it presents all kinds of new complications and problems. I heard a leader once describe it this way. I don't know if I love it, and I've said it out loud before, and people kind of like scratch their heads, but I heard a leader one time, he referenced it as like the more pigs you add to the pen, the sloppier it gets.
Yeah.
Not that I'm calling people that I lead pigs, right? But it does present more problems and complications as you add to those layers. But through that, it's that calling or that hook I've had towards leading people that have kind of kept me in the game, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, man, I love you brought up a great point there. I'm a firm believer in that. I actually have, I call kind of like when you train with companies, like 5 levels of leadership inside of
Yeah.
a company. And, level one being individual contributor, like your job, you're still a leader, your job of leading yourself. Then there's the direct supervisor, right? Like you're leading individual contributors, and that third level is that leader of leaders, and that's such a jump. Like there's a jump between the skill sets required. What I guess in your estimation, like what is the biggest difference? What is the hurdle? What's the skill set required to successfully transition from directly leading individual contributors, like direct instruction executor, to developing leaders below you?
Yeah, that's super good question. Because I mean, it really is what you described that gap is, really is. It's a wide chasm.
Stop. You can't afford to keep operating this way. You're a smart, successful leader, and right now you're stuck. You know it. And that feeling, it's not weakness. That's data telling you something needs to change. Here's the truth. Saying stuck isn't neutral. It's costing you mentally, professionally, every single day. After 10 years coaching C-suite level executives through exactly problems like this, I have built the GAIN framework, and it delivers clarity in just 20 minutes. Sign up for the No Limit Leadership newsletter and get the Unstuck Guide free. The link is in the description. 5 seconds to change everything. Do it now.
I actually think we probably don't take account of how wide that chasm is between those two levels. And maybe there's a leader listening here or people that are much smarter, much further along in their journey that would disagree with me and push back. But for me, over the last even several years where I've, kind of jumped that chasm multiple times, even helped others, lead across that gap, it's a big gap. When you're leading people that are, the direct contributors, maybe, in your industry, it's called like a frontline employee, whatever you want to call it. You're still asking a question often of one, we learn this in meta performance and we really lean into it rather than meta performance is the high performer problem of how can I be the best? So leaders are often asking that question, maybe for the first time when they're a leader, like a brand new leader leading people that are contributing on the front lines and executing on the front lines. They're asking that question for the first time at a higher intensity level. They're also asking the question. I remember asking this question myself, even entering leadership, was like, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? Or like, how do I get people to even like, how do I lead them in this direction? Because like you may have like this vision or idea or goal or KPI, and you're still asking this question as a leader for the very first time of like, how do I get them there? Like you're learning leadership. I've actually seen leaders, even in the company I'm a part of, where we took them maybe past that chasm way too quickly, where they're asking the question, how do I be the best leader? How does my team, how can my team be the best? To now you're leading other leaders who are helping your overall team, your grander team, leading them. And what I've seen is the gap there is like, there's a lot of failure in leading people at that lower level of trying to do it the same way at the next. I think there's an inspiration piece, a charisma piece that is probably under indexed in that area where you necessarily can't have your finger on the pulse with every single person at that level. Cause if we're talking volume, for instance, like if you're leading 5-10 people, and then now you've kind of moved up that level to where I have these sub leaders, these groups, these teams under me, and we're looking and analyzing the results of all of them. You are now leading those people to results across the graph. So there's multiple people that you really can't have a personal touch with or a personal, commitment or development to. And one of the things that you get to do at that new level is you get to now develop people's leadership of those people. So you may be wondering, how do I become a better leader myself? When you're also like very much responsible for making the leaders under you better leaders and calling them forward and calling them up. And, it's pretty fresh on my mind to see and know when I've seen leaders or in our company or in roles I've been in take that jump. And really, we've had to like kind of pull them back after a while and say, hey, maybe we didn't prepare you for this chasm jump quite as well as we should. That this is a completely new ballgame. The leading leaders really is different. It really is like a higher calling. It takes a different amount of inspiration and charisma. It takes a grander amount. I love John Maxwell, and the law of navigation comes to mind a lot. It takes a whole new level of navigation. Like I think of, I think he references it too in the book, 21 Laws of Leadership, of like the Titanic, for instance, right? Like if you watch the movie, and who knows how accurate that can be, but when they see the iceberg up ahead, there's multiple things or multiple communication points and changes and alterations and pivots that have to be made in line and in sync with one another. So you don't have your hand on the wheel, but you're leading the guy who leads the guy who leads the guy who has their hand on the wheel. And that's how I see at this level, when you're leading leaders or leading people who lead others, that's how I see that. It's like you have to have a whole new level and a whole new intimacy with the law of navigation, of seeing the iceberg way further up ahead, having better binoculars, like in my mind, to use that, really overuse that analogy, right? But like you have to be able to see it, have to be able to have the experience to know, like, hey, when is it and how is it we're going to pivot and kind of steer here.
Yeah, what I heard there was, when you're a leader of leaders and you're more senior in a company, there's this need for, or additional need for, real clarity in communication, like clarity of intent, like, we're heading this direction. This is what success looks like. Here's the bigger picture, right? At a level, so they can kind of pivot, and because they're having to make decisions with their direct reports that without your input. So they, I see that as a big differentiator, right? Like if you're leading the individual contributor, it can be very directive. Like that you have that KPI, here are the steps. How do you fix them as an individual so they can get a thing done? And there doesn't need to be a whole lot of like, well, how does this individual, how does that action impact or change, the larger scope of where we're headed and other departments and all that. You're really helping that person execute a very well-defined task. And when you're leading other leaders, since leadership is so hard to define and so, different with each person that they're with, you need to give them clarity, greater clarity over a larger scope, what I would call intent. Like, what's my intent? So they can operate with inside that and be free to make decisions. And then, and I do think I think communication, clarity are so important. I know I was just meeting with a leadership team. It's so funny. I came with a leadership team I met with in person. And as I met with the owner and some of the partners, and it became very clear to me that like there was this very clear vision inside of the one partner's head and nobody else really got it. Like it got real fuzzy real fast. And I was like, and so my question to them was like, if you're not clear at the, VP level, like what hope does that junior manager or, leader have at their level to be able to communicate and answer questions? And I think that, you mentioned maybe in your company or in other companies you've seen, maybe promote too fast into those spaces without development. And so it comes to mind there of like, are you testing the ability of, are you able to communicate clear expectations to them? Or are you just throwing them in and being like, figure it out with unclear expectations that really don't set them up for success? I think we do that really often with leaders. And, to be fair, I always challenge companies when I meet with them, when they talk about getting leaders ready for that jump. I'm like, cool, what is their development program? How did you test them on that skill set? And they're like,
Great.
I don't, they did pretty good at this level. But that doesn't mean, but it's like, well, yeah, but there's a new skill set for this. So like, where was that developed? Like, where are you investing in them? Where's the spend and energy? And just like an individual, don't tell me your priorities, like show me your pocketbook and your calendar. I'll tell you what they are. And that's what I would tell a company. It's like, I don't even care if you tell me you want to develop leaders, like show me your budget and where you spend time. And I'll let you know if you develop leaders.
Totally. Yeah. That's so good. You know what comes up for me, Sean, there too, is like often in like revenue producing companies, where the top line and the bottom line matter a lot. One of those mistakes is if that person produces revenue, so maybe it's a sales company, maybe they're building a system, whatever it may be, maybe it's a product. If that person is really great at producing revenue, that they must be the best or they must be the ideal fit for leadership. What I've actually learned in the last several years is that's almost never the case. We actually would thrive and the company would thrive a lot more if you kept them in their seat where they're at and continue to develop them. Maybe it's time that they need, and it may not be a fit to where they're so good at what they're doing. It's like, well, that's the clear person to be in this leadership role. Often there's actually a lot more qualities, competencies that we're not considering in that moment, maybe when we make that decision to call that person up into leadership. So I really don't think it's like, I don't know if a prerequisite or the silver bullet's always going to be you're the best in your position. Let's continue to invest and pull you up.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point because some organizations are maybe set up with this idea that like leadership is the only way to advance.
Yes.
And I do think, especially if you have some specialty skill sets that are valuable to a company, making sure you think through ahead of time of like, if you have, the world's greatest engineer or, the world's greatest salesperson and the world's greatest creative or whatever else, like that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be your CTO or your chief of engineering. Like you need to find a way to maximize if they want to learn it, cool. But a lot of them maybe don't. And that needs to be okay. And I think there's a lot of organizations that struggle if they haven't thought that through. Like how do you compensate and continue to motivate and really empower a specialist that isn't going to move up into your management structure? I think that's a conversation a lot of companies need to think through.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it may be one that's forgotten to be had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe maybe it's not on their mind or top of mind, especially when you have like leadership gaps, leadership voids, especially like, what's coming to mind is companies that scale fast, scale quickly. You have a lot of people that are producing revenue at a really high rate. Therefore, seats are growing. The position count is growing. The full-time equivalent is growing. And that leads like leadership voids, leadership gaps of like, well, who's going to lead this team of people? This team used to have 2 people, and now it has 12. Can one person effectively lead all 12? And what's fascinating, I was talking to a business operator recently that has a very flat organization. He's a 100 million plus org, and he's championed a flat organization. He has leaders leading 30, 40 people. So it's what I also find interesting is there's definitely different philosophies at play here to find what success will be and can be. And maybe some of those times when you have those leadership gaps, a flatter organization is beneficial to put the people in the right spots to succeed, because maybe that development has not yet happened or you've not identified the right people.
Man, it's interesting you bring that up, and maybe you have to maybe connect me with that person because I'm intrigued, and it'd be great to have them on the podcast because I see that, we both are executive coaches and part of the same firm with that Novus Global, and joining that firm, everyone is independent, right? So there's like a few leaders, but it really is a very flat org. And in my previous training in the military, and I found this to be true with most companies, is there was a lot of studies back in the, this goes back like basically hundreds of years, but in the early 20th century around World War II, they really nailed it down and said one person can effectively lead 6 to 9 people. So the military call it span of control. Yeah. For like 6 to 9 units. So if you go to the military, like you go to an infantry unit, like if you look at so at the lowest level, like a private is part of a 3-person fire team. So they have one team leader with 3 people. And then there's going to be 2 to 3 teams on a squad. And there's going to be 4 squads in a platoon. And then a company's going to have 120 people, but 4 to 5 platoons. And all the way up to like the division with 20,000 people is going to have 6 brigades. So it's like everyone only has 6 to 9 people. And I found that to be true, that like you can manage more than that. Like I can know what you're doing. But if I'm in charge of 30 people, I can't know you to a point, Mackie, where you walk in to work one day or I get in a meeting and I'm just like, whoa, something's up, man. You don't look like yourself. What's going on with you today? Like, I don't know you like that. Like it's like nearly impossible to be able to do that. So I think that to your point though, like this flat org concept and technology is obviously empowering us. And I think that's going to change the way we lead in a lot of ways. But it's a place like Novus Global where everyone is an independent business owner and everyone is super high agency, and the onus is on each individual to produce and build the company or build the practice that they want. There's not necessarily, and there's a lot of formal training, but there's not an expectation like I'm going to have a person over me who tells me what I need to do today. Right. So yeah, it's like, I don't know. And I don't know if you've seen this. I'm interested in your take on this as as a C-suite executive and part of a high growth company and working with high growth companies. As we integrate maybe AI, I see a future where companies get smaller and you have very high agency people empowered with AI tools, agents, employees that they run. And so that person's capabilities are in be able to produce are increased so much that you have companies are run by 20, 30, 40, 50 super high agency, high level people who like are almost like you put 40 entrepreneurs in a room and put them on a team and empower them with technology, and they'll be able to produce what 1,000-person company could otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's something that I wrestle with on leadership space. So I don't know, how have you seen, not to, I guess we jump right into AI, but like, how have you seen that affect it? And do you see companies start to look for that? Is that on the horizon in terms of what people are trying to do in order to maximize productivity?
Yeah, that's fascinating. AI is a fascinating topic when it comes to leadership, when it comes to like organizations, how they run. And I think it's moving faster than we even anticipate. Like, even if you're the one that's reading a new AI article or news drop every day, even being inside of a company or like a fast growing company where we're consistently experimenting with AI tools, preferred AI vendors, people that are creating new technology, frankly, daily. It's moving faster than we think. So I would say, to your point, yes. Like, I think what we will interestingly see is there's been experimentation with AI in customer facing situations where that's actually starting, at least my occurrences, that's starting to be pushed back on in some spaces and markets where you're becoming a differentiator if you have a live person to talk to or have a live person to handle your situation as a customer. So that's been interesting. That's actually, I was actually talking with someone recently who's at like the senior level of an AI company that serves, companies I'm a part of. So they're a vendor, they have AI software. They've actually seen like a dip in like, hey, customer facing AI agents aren't necessarily being as embraced as quickly as by the populace as they'd want to. But everything within the back office operations, like you're referencing, where, a company that could have taken 100 in their back office could probably in the future do it in 20, 25, 30. Time consuming tasks are being done by AI at such an alarming rate. And the AI bubble is getting so inflated that multiple companies and people are coming up with solutions to the same problems. And as the supply of those problem solvers become higher, actually the access to them becomes easier. The price point starts to drop. Because I have this one singular problem, multiple people have the AI tool to solve it, and now they're competing for my business to pay for. So I would say any AI that's behind the curtain of like a customer facing company, for instance. So if you're not working with customers, you'll see those AI tools really take over a lot of those back office operations. Things like finances and accounting, really all the way up to the controller level. Any kind of filing or data entry, summarizing, automations. There's just so many. Claude Cowork just came out, and Claude Cowork is proving to be like the direct to consumer solution to automate all sorts of tasks and workflows and protocols. So it's moving, I think, quicker than we even realize, Sean.
Yeah, interesting challenges when it comes to
Yeah.
human leadership in that space as we move forward. I know on the customer facing side, right? And this is up your alley with like marketing, is maybe it'll get to a point we really can't tell. But even as good as it is right now, if I'm on social media or something and an ad pops up and it's a video of someone talking, and I can instantly be like, this is AI. I'm like, to your point, I almost always, I'm like, I don't even want to see this. Like,
Yeah.
it's like we really do discount. I was actually thinking about this earlier. It's not really a leadership thing, but I was actually having this thought earlier just today of when it comes to like creative
Hmm.
things and AI and robots and that sort of things. Like, we really don't give, like, it's not in us as human beings to give credit to a robot. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not impressed by a robot. I'm
Yeah.
not impressed by the person who like made AI a robot, but like, I'm not like some AI thing could like make the most beautiful painting I've ever seen. I'm not like, wow, I'm awed and impressed by you. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, cool trick. I don't know. It's like we're not able to give
Yes.
it credit in the same way we give a human credit for the work they do. And I don't know. Maybe that'll change in the future as our
Yeah.
kids get more integrated. But I think right now it's really hard to cross that.
Yeah, and if I could try to parlay it into a leadership piece, because I think with leadership comes experimentation. I love the book Thinking in Bets, right? So kind of using the poker game analogy and strategy in your leadership. that is where AI is really living right now, is like thinking in bets and experimentation. So even when it comes to creative, this AI slop term has come up, and that's what people are calling what they see online when they know it's a caption written by ChatGPT, or if it's a graphic that looks just like every other graphic that's been prompted by Gemini, whatever it may be. And as leaders, I think we have to be thinking in bets and experiments and reviewing results quickly. People's brains are shutting off to that. People are not embracing it. I think it's fascinating you bring up too, like not giving a robot credit. Like I think there's just something biological about us that doesn't think to. It's subconscious. Like we work with computers every day. We're so familiar with technology that you're almost like, of course, or at least this is me, my perspective. Of course, a computer can do that. Of course, AI can do that. Like that's almost where we're at with AI. Where I had a friend, he's a songwriter, so he's a creative, and he's been in different leadership spaces as well in the nonprofit industry. Showed me a couple songs that Suno, the popular AI app, improved for him. A couple demos, and I almost had the occurrence where I told him, I was like, "Well, of course they could do that." Like, I mean, and I don't want to give that credit. Like, I know who wrote the song, right? I know that there's a creative here in play, and I think for leaders, we really have to be careful of what we do embrace, what we do add fuel to, what we kind of even stick to get into the marketing field. What do we attach our brand to? Like how do we train people to view us? I think we have to be really cautious of that as leaders.
Dude, that's such a good point. Even as, the space of a solopreneur or a small business owner that's trying to build a personal brand for, say, a coaching service or whatever else, of like, I didn't even think about, we think so much of, I get so much marketing and info of like, here's how you can use AI and here's how you can have it automate all your content and here's how I can do all these things. And you mentioned the pictures, but like, I didn't think of the fact that makes sense to me now. Like, but when I do see a brand and I see that AI slop next to it, it does decrease instantly, or at least it attaches now that company is using AI.
Yeah.
It loses a bit of like like the human element. It loses a bit of its value to me. It's like, oh, you're almost commoditizing. You're a commodity now.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I would say, even again, to relate it to leadership of, I know if that executive summary you sent is written by something else, by a robot. I can tell. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, that whether for good or bad, ChatGPT and AI tools will be extremely helpful in getting those tasks done. I'll read every single SOP someone provides me that was helped or formatted, or, the content was created using, I do it. Like I do it myself. I think we have to be cautious of, again, is another thing is the cognitive decline. Even I read an article recently. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the MIT study where they did brain scans around like AI users, AI super users. For us leaders, we are being trained to use our brain less almost, where like I can write an executive summary or, a research paper or an SOP. It used to take me hours or days, or a team, you put a tiger team together to address a problem, to where you can now ask, an AI agent or bot to do it for you in seconds, and you can read it and be like, yeah, that looks good. Right. And you're kind of flexing your brain and exercising your brain less. And people are actually researching that currently, of this is probably more damaging to us than we realize. And I think for leaders, if we have people that were responsible for leading towards goals and leading towards a thing, I think it's even more important for us to be cautious of that.
Man, that is such a good point. And it really brings us a bit of full circle back to leadership, this AI discussion and how it can be implemented and how it changes company culture. Because a few things that, you mentioned, like not giving, or we talked about like not giving a credit to the AI or a robot, but like no one wants to be led by a robot. Like no one's, and if we're defining leadership I've got my own definition in some way of basically inspiring or influencing others to grow into their greatest version, right? I mean, no matter what definition you use, to me, it always comes down to something like helping them identify, a vision bigger than they thought possible, helping them, guiding them to think that way, helping them realize some potential for themselves that even they couldn't see. And like, that is just such a human, like at the core of what it means to be, I think, a human. And so, and to lean into that, I almost wonder, and I'm coming to this conclusion, maybe for the first time on this right now, of like, wow, just like having AI and robots, make art or mass produce things it's actually going to make the creative who does it themselves be more valuable. Like
Yes.
in the business space, it's like if you're a company who, despite all of this, implements AI, but also can lead and develop and coach people, you're going to be at a premium.
Yeah. Yeah, anything biological, right? That, you are needed for this. Like 100%, it's going to be more celebrated and be a highest premium.
You've built something real: the career, the title, the business, maybe all three. But ever feel simultaneously overwhelmed and bored? Like your calendar is full, your responsibilities keep growing, and yet somewhere deep down, you know you're no longer expanding. That's the strange reality for a lot of high performers. Not failing, not collapsing, just slowly settling for less than they're actually capable of. Because eventually, talent stops being the issue. The real problem is this: nobody in your life is challenging you at the level you actually operate. I spent years sitting across from executives and owners who had every reason to be satisfied and helping them name what they were actually hungry for. A vision call is one focused conversation, no pitch, no program, just clarity on who you're becoming, what you really want next, and what's standing in your way. You don't need more motivation. You need someone who can see what you can't yet. Go to seanpatton.me/vision. That's seanpatton.me/vision and book your call today, because the life you're capable of isn't going to wait forever.
I think leadership is maybe one of those main things, like you said, like no one wants to be led by a robot, by words on the screen. I've watched plenty of videos. I've even taken, some trainings that people have sent me that are created by like AI bots that are on the screen. So like animated AI. It's not there yet. Like I know what this is. Right? It's not great. And even when it gets there, there's arguments being made now of, there's something biological about us humans that we'll always know, like that we can recognize it. I'm sure it'll get very good to where it's very hard to recognize. But like you said, you don't want to be led by a robot. I think leaders this is the time to sharpen your skills as a leader, sharpen your cognition as a leader, rather than, the other option, because you're going to be needed in the future and you're the differentiator between that robot, right? Like I personally, as you were talking, this is the thought I had was, as I'm reading words on the screen from a prompt that I created or something that was spit out for me by an AI, I've never been invited or even embraced a perspective that it gave me. Like as much as I've used it, and I would consider myself like somewhat of a moderate to upper moderate user, I can't think of one time where I read something that it gave to me and I was like, oh, wow, I never thought of that before. And, as leaders and even as coaches for us, like that is one of the main things that we seek after, is to invite people to have new occurrences, to invite people to have new perspective, and then to see them actually take that and to implement it. I've not had that experience personally with AI, and I don't know if we will ever get there. Maybe we will, but to your point, I think as leaders, it's the time to really hone what we do well, so it differentiates us from that.
When I think if we think about great leaders, or if I think about great leaders especially, right, and you think about the leaders, what are the best, who would you consider the best leaders, the inspirational ones? There is this, maybe this is a crux of why there's sort of like a mutual exclusion for AI and leadership, or machines and leadership, is there is an element. You mentioned inspiration earlier when you talked about leaders. Like there's an inspiration when you see someone that's a great, that you consider, you feel the leadership from them and you're pulled to follow. There's almost always an aspirational aspect. Like I want to be like them. And maybe even not holistically as a complete human being. Maybe it's just in business, or man, as a in their faith or with their family. Like that's the type of father I want to be, or whatever it might be, right? Like mother. There's an aspiration, like I want to be like that. And so as a leader, or when you're being led, and so it's nearly impossible to be like, well, I want to be this algorithm. Right. Like, it's hard to be like this. Yeah. How do you have that same sort of, thing like that comes up for me, that there's like a new occurrence. And then the second one was like all the stuff you mentioned about, what we do with coaching and calling out people's occurrences and blind spots and all that. And I think something that, in the last even 6 months working with Novus and going through the meta performance training that we went through, is the power of disruption, right? It's like stopping someone literally mid-sentence, like, da, 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 da. Bullshit. Like, telling them why, like, that's some of those powerful coaching. And like, when does AI do that?
Yeah.
and then say, when I was 5 years old, actually, I saw this and like this, like I don't see that happening either. And that's one of the most powerful parts of coaching, whether it's a formal coaching space or coaching in a leadership space, I think.
Yeah, it's incredibly not disruptive. Yeah, I'm totally with you, Sean. I mean, they've actually done, so I guess I've read a lot of AI articles recently, but like I was reading another one recently where it kind of tested for different conversations in the different modes and the different platforms of like, hey, what's it going to do with this? So, and maybe a therapy situation or maybe like a consulting situation, like what's it going to do in this conversation with this prompt, et cetera. And what they've found resoundingly is you can take AI for a ride. It will believe everything you say. It will not stop you in your tracks. It will not invite you to a new perspective. And it'll just believe whatever you want it to believe. And you can have it convince you and you can convince each other, you're talking to this robot of almost anything. And what more power does a leader hold than to invite someone into a new perspective, to help them pivot in a new trajectory, to give them that piece of feedback that like changes their life, that takes them from a place where they were going to lose their job in a month to they're one of the most celebrated leaders or employees in your company. I don't want to say never, but I just don't see right now that AI and those tools can do that like a leader can.
Yeah, I love that. You've been a leader, I mean, for decades, right? Like since your base sounds like basically you from high school, like right out of college, like hopping right into faith-based leadership, and now worked up to be a C-suite level executive in marketing. And then I'm sure there was, especially in those spaces, like coaching and development, that sort of thing. But as you've invested in yourself to become a meta performance coach, to be able to coach your people leader, coach your own team better, and even coach other executives, what has changed most in how you approach leadership because of that?
Yeah. It may be the first thing that comes to mind is what you just asked around, or what I just mentioned around feedback. So you asked around like meta performance. For me, the process of getting meta performance certified was mostly for my leadership. And what I found is these tools that we learn to coach people with are very much transformative for yourself, very much transformative for teams, especially if you're leading one. And I found that incredible. I think that's, a testament to why we can coach really powerful leaders that are over large companies and they see such incredible results. For me, feedback is one of those pieces. We use this feedback process that, in meta performance is to me tailored to be produce incredible results. It's taught extremely well. It's a process that's thorough. That would be one piece for me that I immediately took into my leadership and saw huge fruit and results from. As a leader, there's expectation that how to give feedback. That doesn't mean that you're good at it. You'll probably do it, and it's like a power tool. You'll probably hurt yourself at some points. I remember you mentioned I've been in leadership for, thankfully most of my adult life. And what I could say is like the early days of leadership when I'm in my 20s, for instance, and maybe at that point I'm a youth pastor, I'm leading high school kids, but I'm even leading parishioners, congregants of the church as they continue to lead kids. I'll give feedback and give it in a really messy way. And that has impact in ways that are positive and impact in ways that are negative. But for me, meta performance like has a thorough and incredible process of how to give feedback where it's a gift. It's highlighted in a big way in the Beyond High Performance book by Jason Jaggard that we both know and have read. It's the spinach in the teeth. And I love that process and how, it can continue to really flourish some results, some thriving amongst teams and leaders.
I love the call out on feedback. I actually made a note as I especially go into larger companies and work with them or other teams. I mentioned before, I'll ask the question, okay, what's your development? How are you getting leaders from other? And most time there's not even a process at all, but that's a good question. And to your point, what's your process for feedback? Do you have one? Does your company even have one or training on it? Most companies do not, but it's such a critical component of leadership. So you can go over the exact meta performance process, or my question would be for you, what are the critical elements of feedback to make it effective?
Yeah, no, that's super good. I'd say my personality is always leaned towards direct. I would say direct is, one of the premier elements of feedback that's going to be effective, at least. This even comes from elements of books and writings around this topic, like Radical Candor. If you're familiar with that, Crucial Conversations, fierce conversations. This idea of direct comes up often. And the truth is, in leadership, no matter how large the company is, you're going to find a lot of leaders that dance around feedback. Maybe they keep it, it's like, and it's not so direct. They're like trying to, circle around the tree to get to it. uh, I personally don't find a ton of value in indirect feedback. The
Mm,
worst kind of indirect feedback is triangulation, right? You're giving it somewhere else to someone else, about something or someone where you could give it directly. And, even what I've coached my leaders on around that directness is every leader kind of has their limitation around why they struggle with being direct. Maybe they struggle with being too direct, right? Like
mm,
wherever they fall on that spectrum of even like taking feedback and turning it into like a caretaking piece. That I'd
mm,
say that's a danger in feedback, is not being so direct, as direct as you could be, and almost kind of like doing the whole, crap sandwich ordeal. So I'm going to sandwich it with a compliment and a compliment here. To me, I'd say directness is huge. And then
mm,
I'd say with direct is neutrality, right?
mm.
Being neutral of, being direct does not mean you have to be look upset or look angry or be mad or look mad. I mean, some of the worst feedback I would say as a leader I've ever received from leaders was feedback given in emotion, emotionally charged
Mm.
feedback, is not neutral. So I would say if you feel like you're being direct or that's how you're embracing yourself as a leader, but you find yourself giving emotionally charged feedback, I would invite that person to what does it look like to be neutral in that feedback? To treat it like it's data and a gift for that person, rather than saying, well, I'm direct and I'm going to be this intense with it. It's like, let's peel back the emotions here and find some neutrality.
I love that. Direct, neutral. I think depending on the situation, often, asking if they want feedback.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
like getting permission for feedback is such a powerful
Yeah.
component of that. And they were like, no, I don't. And it's like, all right, well, I'm your boss. So I'm going to give it to you anyway. Like, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
but to your point, maybe it's like not in this moment, it's like, okay, cool. And our one-to-one on Friday, like we need to talk about
Yeah.
this, or like
Oh yeah.
settle on a different time so like this is a good time for feedback. One of the interesting parts was actually in giving notes or feedback when I went through a speaker training course with heroic public speaking. And we talked about giving feedback or notes in that context of someone giving a speech and you're watching or whatever. And I think being very clear about what asking for it, but then what do they want feedback on? And like, and I
Mm,
think in our world, that's more like, is it aligned with vision? Right. Cause
right.
it's like, I could give you feedback of like, hey, Mackie, like, actually, I think you look better in brighter shirts or something. And you're like, cool, man. I don't care what you think about my shirt. Like that's, like, that's not wanted feedback as opposed to like,
Right.
hey, Mackie, I know you have a vision to be
Mhm.
the best meta performance executive coach you can be. I have some feedback on it. Do you want it?
Yeah.
So like making sure that it's aligned with what their vision is. And, in the speaking world, we would often, so this is, I think a tool that we can use on our teams is, before the thing, right? Before the presentation, before the pitch, before the meeting, whatever, letting people know, hey, by the way, I'm really working on clarity. I'm
Mm,
working on not saying I'm working on not talking over people. I'm
yeah.
working on asking great questions. Like get directing them. This is what I want feedback on. I want you to look for it. And it's super powerful in the speaking space, but I think it is super powerful in the group and
Yeah.
leadership space as well.
Well, yeah, telling on yourself, right? Like there's power in that vulnerability, right? I would say there's probably an understanding from leaders at times that, that vulnerability will, cost them in some way. Or, maybe there's an insecurity in their leadership to where like I don't want people to know I struggle with that or that I'm working on this or that I haven't figured this out. Especially as the higher you get in an organization, people do have those perspectives that you should have blank figured out. XYZ should be nailed down, locked in, right? I think there's, at least for me, a lot more power when a leader does exactly what you just said and said, "Hey, I'm working on this and I'm asking you guys to call me out on it." I have
Mhm.
a leader in my life that does this so well. Like he's like his vulnerability levels off the charts, and that can be, serve people, that can help people. I think it's extremely resourceful in so many ways as a leader. And one thing he always asks us, he's like, "Man, like if you hear me do this thing again, or if you hear me communicate in this way again, or, if this comes up, will you let me know? Like, will you hold me accountable? Will you give me the gift of that feedback to say, hey, I know it's not something you want to be doing, because you remember that time you told us this is something you're working on, you did it again. And I think that's a gift, especially like you're literally giving them something they asked for. And to withhold that at that point is just, on your part, not the best leadership, not the best way of being and showing up. I think it's powerful.
Yeah. Well, I love that we ended on the power of vulnerability
Yeah, man.
as leaders. So, Mackie, this has been awesome as always. And I feel like we could just rap for hours and
Oh,
hours.
totally.
But I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the effort and the leadership that you're providing as a coach and in your company. And if someone is interested in, what it might be like to get coached by Mackie, where do they go?
Yeah. So you can go to novusglobal.com, and I believe it's a .com, but it's and I'm there on the list of coaches along with you, Sean. So we can all we're all there, and anyone in our firm, anyone at Novus Global would bring powerful results in that coaching. But yeah, that's where you can find me as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll make sure that we put the link directly to that landing page in the show notes so you can go directly to it. Well,
Awesome.
thanks so much, Mackie. It's been great chatting with you, dude.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to what else you do and the results you create, Sean, in your leadership and coaching, man. Thanks.
Thanks for being a part of the No Limit Leadership family. This isn't just a podcast. We're building a movement of no limit leaders driven to unlock our greatness and lead the world forward. If this made you think or gave you something useful, please, 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 right now, go hit follow and then share it with one leader you believe in. Challenge limits, develop leaders, fuel greatness.